Hundreds of farmers in Arkansas gathered at a town hall last week to ask Congress for help. Mounting debt, aging equipment, and disappearing profits are making it nearly impossible for them to break even, let alone to turn a profit. One of those farmers calls the president's tariffs, quote, the ice cream on top of a cake of a perfect storm.
January 2026. Iowa. Farmers are making a choice no farmer should ever have to make. Sell the equipment you need to farm, or lose the farm entirely.
They're choosing the equipment, because at least if you sell your tractor, you might keep the land, might survive another season, might find a way to keep farming. But here's what's stunning. Here's what nobody prepared them for. The equipment they're being forced to sell is worth half what they paid, sometimes less, and they still owe the bank the full amount. So they're selling equipment at a loss, staying in debt, and trying to farm without the machinery they need to grow crops. This is the impossible math destroying Iowa agriculture right now. And what I'm about to show you is going to make you understand why thousands of family farms are about to disappear forever.
The forced liquidation.
Meet Tom Richardson, fourth-generation corn and soybean farmer in Story County, Iowa, 1,800 acres. His great-grandfather broke that ground in 1912. January 2026, Tom listed his John Deere 8370R tractor for sale, not because he wanted to, because his bank gave him an ultimatum. They called me in December, said my operating line of credit was maxed out, said I needed to reduce debt before spring planting, or they'd call the loan. I had two choices: sell equipment or sell land. Tom bought that tractor new in 2019 for $385,000. Financed it over 7 years at 4.2% interest. He still owes $220,000 on the loan.
The tractor sold at auction for $145,000.
Read that again. He sold equipment for $145,000 that he still owes $220,000 on. After the sale, Tom is still $75,000 in debt on a tractor he no longer owns. And he's one of the lucky ones, because at least his tractor sold. The equity destruction. Here's what's stunning Iowa farmers: the complete destruction of equipment equity. Sarah Chen farms 2,400 acres of corn and soybeans in Wright County. She purchased a John Deere S780 combine in 2020 for $495,000, financed over 10 years. Current loan balance, $342,000. January 2026, facing bankruptcy, Sarah listed the combine for sale, best offer, $180,000. She would lose the combine and still owe the bank $162,000 for equipment she no longer owns, for machinery she desperately needs to harvest crops. Sarah made a different choice. She decided to file Chapter 12 bankruptcy instead. At least in bankruptcy, the court might restructure my debt. If I sell that combine, I lose everything and still owe the bank. That's not a choice. That's financial suicide. But here's the part that's devastating farmers across Iowa. Not everyone can file bankruptcy. Chapter 12 has strict requirements, income limits, debt-to-asset ratios. Many farmers don't qualify, so they're forced to sell at catastrophic losses while staying in debt. The market collapse.
The used equipment market in Iowa has completely imploded, and farmers are discovering this the hard way.
December 2024, a used John Deere 8320R tractor sold at auction in Iowa for $285,000. Same model, similar hours, comparable condition. January 2026, the exact same model sold for $132,000. A $153,000 decline in value in 13 months. Farm equipment doesn't depreciate that fast under normal circumstances. A well-maintained tractor loses maybe 8 to 10% annually. What Iowa farmers are experiencing isn't depreciation, it's market collapse. Why? Because the market is flooded with equipment from bankrupt farms. Auctioneers are reporting 3 to 5 times normal inventory levels. Repossessed tractors, combines, planters, grain carts, everything. But the buyers have disappeared. The farmers who might purchase used equipment are the same farmers trying to sell their own equipment to survive. Nobody has money. Nobody's getting financing. Nobody's buying. Mike Peterson owns Heartland Auctions in Ames, Iowa. He's conducted farm equipment auctions for 28 years. I've never seen anything like this. We're getting 20 tractors consigned for auctions that used to have 5. And we're getting 2 bidders instead of 15. Prices are collapsing because there's no demand. Farmers are stunned when they see what their equipment actually brings. They expected losses. They didn't expect 50 to 60% value destruction. The bank pressure. Here's what's forcing farmers to sell. Banks are panicking. Agricultural loan delinquencies in Iowa hit 8.2% in Q4 2025. That's the highest level since 1987. Banks holding billions in farm loans are watching their portfolios deteriorate. Their response? Demand immediate debt reduction or call loans entirely. James Holland farms 3,200 acres in Hamilton County. His operating line of credit maxed at $1.8 million. December 2025, his bank demanded he reduce debt to $1.2 million by March 1st, or they'd foreclose. They gave me 90 days to come up with $600,000. I don't have $600,000. Nobody does. So, they told me to sell equipment. James listed a 2018 John Deere 9570R tractor, purchased for $482,000. Current loan balance, $285,000. Sale price, $198,000. After the sale, James still owes the bank $87,000 on equipment he no longer owns. And he still needs to come up with another $513,000 to meet the bank's demand. He's selling more equipment, a planter, a grain cart, possibly a combine, liquidating the machinery he needs to farm 3,200 acres, because the alternative is losing everything immediately. The impossible math. Let me show you why farmers are being forced into these decisions. Iowa corn farmers are losing $293 per acre in 2025. Soybean farmers losing $117 per acre. Those aren't projections. Those are Iowa State University calculations based on actual costs and commodity prices. A 1,000-acre corn farm loses $293,000 in one season. A 2,000-acre operation loses $586,000. You cannot absorb losses like that without selling assets. But here's where the math becomes impossible. When you sell equipment at 50 to 60% losses and still owe the bank, you're not reducing debt fast enough to matter. Tom Richardson sold his tractor for $145,000, paid down his $220,000 loan to $75,000. But his operating losses for 2025 were $327,000 on his corn and soybean acres. So he's still $402,000 in the hole even after selling his tractor. Next year, he has to rent a tractor to farm. Rental costs approximately $185 per acre. On 1,800 acres, that's $333,000 in additional expenses, which increases his per acre losses even further. Selling equipment to survive actually makes survival less likely, but farmers don't have other options. The psychological devastation. Here's what the numbers don't capture: the psychological impact on farmers forced to sell equipment. Tom Richardson's grandfather bought their first John Deere tractor in 1954. The family has been John Deere loyal for 70 years. 3 generations of Richardsons learned to farm on John Deere equipment. When Tom sold his tractor in January 2026, he said it felt like selling a family member. That tractor represented everything my family built, and I sold it for $145,000 when I paid $385,000. I still owe $75,000 on something I don't own. That's not farming, that's failure. Farmers across Iowa are experiencing the same devastation. Equipment represents more than machinery. It represents independence, the ability to farm on your own terms, multi-generational heritage. Selling that equipment feels like giving up, even when it's the only way to keep the land. Sarah Chen said it clearly. I'm a 4th-generation farmer. My great-grandfather would be horrified that I'm even considering selling our combine, but I'm losing $280,000 this year. I don't have a choice.
The chain reaction.
When farmers sell equipment to survive, it triggers a chain reaction that makes everything worse. Farmers selling equipment floods the used market. Used equipment values collapse. Dealers can't sell inventory. Dealers cut staff. Small-town economies lose jobs. Equipment manufacturers see demand destruction. Factories lay off workers. Fewer workers means less spending. Rural economies contract further. And farmers who sold equipment to survive discover they've made survival harder. Because farming without equipment is more expensive, more risky, more dependent on services that may not be available when needed. It's a death spiral. And Iowa farmers are in the middle of it.
What happens next?
More farmers will be forced to sell. The math doesn't work. When you're losing $293 per acre on corn, you can't keep borrowing. Banks will keep demanding debt reduction. Farmers will keep liquidating equipment. More equipment will flood the market. Values will decline further. Farmers who thought they could sell equipment to survive will discover the equipment isn't worth enough to make a difference. More farmers will file bankruptcy. More farms will be auctioned entirely. More families will lose land held for generations. And the federal government will continue doing nothing. The final truth. Somewhere tonight, an Iowa farmer is listing their combine for sale, knowing they need it to harvest, knowing it's worth half what they paid, knowing they'll still owe the bank after it sells, selling it anyway because the alternative is losing everything immediately. Somewhere tonight, a family is sitting at their kitchen table, doing math that doesn't work, calculating whether selling their planter buys them another 6 months, another season, knowing it probably doesn't matter. Somewhere tonight, a fourth-generation farmer is walking through their equipment shed, looking at machinery their grandfather bought, machinery they're about to sell, wondering if they're the generation that loses the family farm. This is what being forced to sell equipment to survive looks like. Not from corporate boardrooms, not from bank headquarters, from Iowa farm kitchens where families are making impossible choices. Iowa farmers are stunned, not because they're losing money. They knew that was coming. They're stunned because selling everything they need to farm doesn't actually save them. It just delays the inevitable while making them poorer. Leave a comment below. Would you sell your equipment to try to save your farm? And hit subscribe because this crisis is accelerating. More farmers are being forced to make this choice every single day.